it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greetings, everybody. Ooh, who said they're missing FPL and couldn't wait to get going? Not us, that's for sure. Anyway, to get into this some more, I'm joined by Sam, who's actually doing his second show of the week already, having moonlit as Baker on Above Average on Sunday. How you doing, mate? You all right?
Yeah, busy. I'm all over the place at the moment. I don't get time for sleep, but it's FPL, isn't it? We do enjoy it as much as we're going to pretend we don't on today's show, I'm sure. But yeah, I had a good time chatting with Adam on Above Average. He made me feel very welcome, but I'm back here on my home ground. I've got a home fixture tonight, so I'm looking forward to this one. And yeah, I think there's a few people in the community not really enjoying themselves in FPL at the moment. I think to an extent we are struggling a little bit as well. So hopefully this will be a bit of fun and we can lighten the mood a little bit. In the meantime, though, we are Who Got the Assist. On today's pod, we'll be reflecting on the podcast title, which has been a torrid start. So a quick reflection on the first couple of game weeks, what we might have learned so far and how we're dealing with the fallout from the first couple. We'll look at form versus fixtures, as always. So how the meta is reacting to what we're seeing so far. 1 week punt. So we'll be updating that. We've both nominated our 1 week players for the week ahead. Best captains, as always, a bit of an uncertain one, considering we've got the Arsenal versus Liverpool fixture. So maybe a bit easier if you own certain other premium assets. And of course, finishing off with our teams. One person on this pod, who shall remain nameless, has already used up their 2 free transfers this week. Wonder who. And it is Tuesday, the 26th of August. Crystal Palace play their Conference League qualifier, their second leg this week. And there's also Carabao Cup action going on actually in the background right now, as well as I think there's some tomorrow as well, isn't there, Tom? So there'll be a few potential issues that could arise. We're not expecting too many first teamers in action, but one to keep an eye on for the next couple of days at least. And if you did want to hold off on those transfers, that'd be a perfectly logical reason to do so.
Yeah.
Anyway,
the transfer window is also still open. So,
of course it is. Yeah, we've still got a best part of a week left of that. So all sorts of fun could happen in the next 6-7 days or so.
Yeah,
our teams, Tom?
Let's do it then swiftly. I think you're actually up first, aren't you?
I am.
I think we're kind of on exactly the same points, but you're a chip up on me. So I'm still anointing you the winner of the first couple of game weeks, which is kind of, probably a trophy smaller than the Ashes urn, I think. Yeah. It's so small you can't even see it. It's a microscopic trophy. But win it you have.
Well, I will take the microscopic trophy for the time being. And if it was the Ashes, I'd be very happy with it as well, as a bit of a cricket fan myself. But if you took the last 40 game weeks in FPL, we would be bang level on points, Tom, which is kind of crazy considering we've both had quite different strategies at times in the last 40 game weeks or so. And I'd wager actually, even from the first year of us podding together, I think you were about 2 or 3 points ahead of me at the end. So it's very close. So, yeah, but anyway, we're not talking about the last 40 game weeks. We're talking about the first 2. I did score 48 points this week, which honestly, I don't feel that bad about when I look around at some of the pretty awful scores in the community this week. I feel like I've gotten away with one, if anything. Palmer was a bit of a shock, but I had Anderson coming off my bench with the defensive contribution points. And I had 5 returners in my 11. And I think a lot of people were maybe feeling a little bit worse because they've got João Pedro, but then less returns elsewhere in the 11, as I'm sure we'll come on to with you. But because my returns were a little bit more spread out, I feel like at least I've got a few players that are performing at least half decently. So even though the scores are relatively the same, I don't feel quite as bad. And I've also got players on my bench like Porro, who will also be handy to me next game week and onwards, who also returned in game week 2 as well. So I feel like my squad's not that badly set up. It's just not doing the points at the moment. Tarkowski and Dye both scored 8. Obviously, Golfrin and Dye well taken from the Grealish cross. Tarkowski,
Really was.
bit of a bonus points monster so far, as has been Anderson, not the Nottingham Forest one, who has been just shy both times. And then Salah obviously getting his last minute assist. Esteve, I was playing anyway for his clean sheet. And that is pretty much all she wrote for game week 2. It wasn't an exciting one particularly. Obviously, Palmer could have changed things a little bit, but we'll be talking about that plenty on this pod, I'm sure, Tom, won't we?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm pretty close. So 47 for me. I've doubled the number of players, Sam, who are getting returns. So first week is 2, next week is 4. Maybe it's a proto Fibonacci sequence. I know it's not the actual Fibonacci sequence, but close to. So next week it's going to be 6. It's going to be
nice.
6. It's definitely what's going to happen. Not the best week, of course. I had Esteve as well. Had Anderson. I started him for his Defcon, Salah, and João Pedro. And as you say, exactly right. Like the fact is that my returns were not, spread around like yours were, and I had the fortune of having João Pedro, who I think really benefited from then being no Palmer, oddly, in some ways. I know there was a kind of a bit of a floated notion, shall we say, that maybe João Pedro would be benched for this one, and maybe we'd see Delap and so on and so forth. But it turns out playing them both together was probably the best thing to do. And so it proved with a 15-pointer. But 47 overall for me. And Dewsbury Hall coming off the bench for Palmer. Kevin De Bruyne, he definitely is not. I had Pedro Porro rooted to third bench. Funny story, not really funny story at all. I noticed that when I'd done all my, I'd kind of rearranged my team or whatever to put Esteve on at the end. I think it was kind of just before deadline. I noticed that Pedro Porro was first sub, and then I swapped it all around just to get the bench order intact. So if I hadn't have noticed that, if I hadn't done the final check on my team, I'd have got the 5 points off the bench. But there she blows. Is what it is. And what's the rank? About 5.3 million, isn't it? Something ridiculous like that. So it's certainly a bit of a torrid start. That's for sure. I think over the last couple of years, I've started all right. In fact, the last 3 years, I've started all right. And then, as I said last week, through my own sort of failures, hoisted myself on my own petard. This year, it really does feel like I've kind of entered at trench level. It's just a case of trying to figure out my way out of the trench, or indeed out of the cellar, if using a house analogy. And I suppose kind of the torrid start thing is a good kind of talking point. I don't think we can really kind of talk about it in sort of great quantitative detail, but I think maybe just a quick view on it, a quick discussion on it, it's probably worth doing here, Sam, because it's definitely something that's going to be occupying a lot of people. As we mentioned in the chat already, that people are hovering over panic buttons, wielding wild cards, wielding free hits, and so on and so forth. And look, the rational part is, fairly obviously, this can happen in the game of chance, which it fundamentally is. If we wanted predictable, we'd all be playing fantasy baseball or something like that. Like, the brilliant randomness of football is why we all love it. But to put it into context, 5% of the season has been played and nothing's decided yet. So, just think about it that way. I suspect it will take one more week like this, and we'll see, loads of people just forgetting about FPL following the international break. To be honest, it probably isn't the start that FPL themselves wanted. Like, it's always good for them, for engagement, for everyone to kind of start off well, right? And I don't know, you can always say it's been a bit unlucky. Like, I can point to things like the game week 1, the swing on losing double Forest clean sheet to silly handball, Eze's goal versus Palace, for Palace, being ruled out, which would have caused me to gain, so I had no Chelsea defenders. But there's always the sliding door moments, I think. And, you remember the good ones due to stuff like outcome bias and self-serving bias we spoke about with Ross in the summer. But if things end up going well, you naturally don't go back and re-examine your decisions or get worried about how you're going, do you? And I suppose that's kind of why we're kind of being a bit introspective at the moment. I suppose that's the rational way I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think a sense of calm is required at the moment. There are obvious caveats to that there have been a lot of injuries in the first couple of game weeks. And if you happen to have a squad that has been plagued by a number of those injuries, then buttons are there to help get you out of those situations. But generally speaking, I've seen a lot of very good FPL managers. I don't include myself in that, but you are one of them, Tom, and a lot of them in the chat already, I'm sure, that are in like world-beatingly bad ranks, like the sort of ranks you've never seen them in before after 2 game weeks. And I think what seems to have happened so far is we've had 2 coin flips in the first 2 game weeks, as we do every single game week. And both of them have come up on tails when a lot of the good managers have happened to say heads. That can happen at any point during the season. It just so happens that there's more of a lens on it in the first 2 game weeks when it happens right now straight away, because we've got no other data and we haven't got other game weeks in the bank where we've already had good weeks and therefore we're at a decent rank already. It just so happens we've gotten off to a bit of a stumbly start off the blocks. So it's all in focus. We can see it in our actual overall ranks, not just our game week ranks. If this happened game week 10 and 11 back to back, it would be annoying, but I've got 2 50-ish point weeks in a row. It's not catastrophic. Like, it's not something I'd be losing sleep over. A couple of red arrows in a row, but not massive ones around that point in the season where maybe I'll be at rank 1 million or something and it'd just be a bit of a frustrating time. Because it's straight away, there's just a huge emphasis on I've never been at a rank this low before. And I don't think I actually have been at a rank this low before, certainly not far below it. And I'm sure you're the same. I'm sure a lot of very good managers out there are the same as well. This season, even more so, because there are chips to be used straight off the bat. So few people had a really successful bench boost and therefore in the top few 100K. You've got free hits being played straight away, triple captains as well, because you've got 2 of the lot. There's going to be more chips played in the first couple of game weeks. So all I'd say is, looking at the actual players you've got in your side, have they turned into complete rubbish overnight, or are they still decent players in decent teams? I think it's more likely the latter, but there will be bits of information that we can gain and gather from the couple of game weeks we've seen, because it's not irrelevant to look at those 2 game weeks. It's just not a complete set of data yet. And if I took game week 1 and game week 2, sorry for rambling on here, but if I took game week 1 and game week 2 as isolated weeks and said all of the best picks from game week 1 are the picks that we're all going to go for, Haaland, Wood, and on the other side, you've got Gyökeres, João Pedro as busted flushes. That both of them got reduced minutes. Both of them didn't look really that close to goal, weren't getting chances away, whatever, just not great picks. But game week 2, they both played the full 90, both got multiple returns and both looked absolutely electric. And now they're must-buys all of a sudden. Whereas Haaland and Wood, the exact reverse of that has happened. And that can happen in a very small sample size. Just let it average out for a little bit. Watkins is not a terrible pick all of a sudden just because Villa look a little bit bumpy. Palmer is not a terrible pick because he had a bad game week 1, and so on and so forth. So deal with the issues that are proper issues, injuries, suspensions, things like that, before you get to the, oh, but he's just not been good this season so far, because any player can be bad for 2 game weeks in a row. If that happened later on in the year, game week 10 and 11, you wouldn't even notice it. So a little bit of calm is needed, I think.
No, it's very rational. Now to present you with the devil's avocado on toast.
Absolutely. That's why we're here.
That is the irrational bit is exemplified by who is currently the #1 FPL point scorer. I assume you know who that is.
No. Oh, is it? Oh, hang on. Is it Calafiori?
It is. It's Ricardo Calafiori. 26 points, 0.1 million price rise. And it underlines how the start, it could be said, has upended expectations. He said everything's come up tails and we've all bet heads, or many of us bet heads at least. Not the people in my work mini league who one person captain João Pedro this week. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do except just bow down when you're making a coffee next to them?
Must have known Palmer was injured.
Exactly. ITK, he just saw all the content creators looking down on their phones. That's what he took from it, but fair enough. But to take your low rank point, because the OR is now pretty rubbish, there is this sort of feeling which is kind of, that starts to arise in people, you know, it can push you into there's nothing really to lose territory. And that does allow for a little bit more fun and vibes to occur. We'll come back to this theme at the very end when we come back to my team for this week. It does allow that sort of thing to infiltrate the game. But I think just reflecting on what you said, like, I always say the algorithms are drunk at the start of the season because they need some time to stabilize. And Nikki Bandini, she said on the Garden Foot Weekly last week that football lies in August, which is something she said before. And that makes a lot of sense. It really does, because of the way in which we're in this sort of very sort of protean, embryonic sort of stage of the season. So, you know, as you said, there's more than enough time to kind of make up ground. We've got a bigger toolkit than ever to help us in terms of chips, in terms of, you know, all the different resources which are out there, a new sort of algo, a new sort of statistical source out there in Solio as well. And the algos take a bit of time to self-write if that's how you play. And in general, as you said really astutely, things will normally, over a large sample, even themselves out, and you'll probably be all right. It's just the case that, as you very, very correctly identify, the start of the year, if you don't start well, because anyone always hears at the start of the year is you've got to start well, you've got to start well, you've got to start well. That can be quite dispiriting. But if you're FPL addicts like we are, you're not going anywhere, and you've got to roll with the punches and just trust that, you know, next time it will be all right. And that's why we keep coming back, honestly. So yeah, bit of license maybe for some more gut-based calls if you feel that way inclined, but just keep doing what you're doing. It's a game of chance, and it's not really come up prompts for you yet. But that's not to say that it never will. And if it never will, you've just been the most statistically unlucky person in the world. But that does feel very, very, very unlikely. So yeah. Stick with it.
It'll balance out. It'll balance out over 38 game weeks, I'm sure of it. And I do agree with the hot start thing. Obviously, it is great to get off to a good start, but it's good for two reasons. One is the points, but the second reason it's so important to get off to a good start is because of the players in your team. So if you're looking around and you don't have many points, a bit like myself right now, but you're actually pretty happy with the majority of the players in your side, then that helps you avoid future transfers, because the second problem with getting off to a slow start is not just the lack of points you've got, but also the transfers you need to spend to get up to a team that other people are already on. So you're already not just behind in the points, but you're behind in the transfers as well. And you're just always playing catch up. If you're down on points, that's one thing. But if you're looking at your team thinking, well, there's not that much I really need to change, I'm not that confident in other picks just yet, then you might still be okay on the transfer side of things. You might not need to force it too much. So that's the other thing to suggest there. The final thing I'd say on the having fun with it and going with more gut-based calls, it is so early. And like, it always comes back to this thing on fun in FPL. I completely understand if you want to pick a player for fun, fine. But it's all just framing, isn't it? At the end of the day, points are fun. Like we just want a player to get loads of points, whether that's someone who appears to play DM like a Bruno Fernandes, or someone who appears to be playing right wing like, I don't know, it's just Salah. It doesn't really matter as long as they score the points. So have fun, play the game your way, absolutely. But do realize that doing it for the sake of being different right now does have extra risk attached to it, because again, you could be extra transfers down. If you're taking 1 week punts, then you might leave yourself in a bit of a hole. Just aim for the points and let that be your guide. And it's not working out so far for me, but I intend to be patient with a lot of my picks.
Fair enough. Someone's just says Full Krug won't even out. Fell into that preseason trap. Yes, we did. Yes, we did. The Full Krug who used to be not all of us. No, the sensible ones of us did. Oh, come on. I mean, if that goal had been given, then we would
be fine. It's framing.
Very, very different story. Yeah, it's framing, it's outcome bias, it's all these things. The fact is that, you know, and we'll come on to this actually in a second when we speak about Flora inverts, for example. You know, FPL is such a you can't kind of, you can and you can't. You can sometimes kind of sit there and, as you say, Sam, have a lot of patience as in players, but sometimes there has to be sort of an impetus upon you to maybe make some changes, and that's kind of leading us very, very nicely into form versus fixture for this week. And so, if you didn't listen last week, this is a new bit for this year where we talk through what's going on in the FPL world. And they're not all on screen if you're watching on YouTube, but some are with price points, non-pen XGI. That's non-pen if you're wondering about Bruno. Of course, there's heavy health warnings because there's only 2 weeks, but over the course of the season, this will obviously become a lot more useful. And then let's read matchups. But generally, they're players who are peaking interest in terms of quote-unquote form, and next upcoming fixtures, or both, in terms of the FPL meta. And this will be longer or shorter depending on what we want to talk about. So maybe, you know, as evidence through the last bit, we'll have our usual WGTA sort of deep dive on something. This becomes quite brief. But this week, as with last week, it makes a lot more sense to sort of spend a bit of time here. So showcased here, and ones we'll kind of mainly talk about, but other people will kind of come into the discussion, are João Pedro, Semenyo and Wood. I think kind of broadly for the form side of things, and for the fixture side of things, Ollie Watkins, Verts and Bruno F. So it's not kind of exclusively market forces. Although I posted today, it's absolutely hilarious that Bruno has been bought by probably 110,000 now, and sold by about 130,000 now. 130,000 people have seen enough after that penalty miss. Yeah, very, very strange. But hey, though that is our sort of pick up for this week. I mean, there are a few like Ekatike that, I think we kind of said our piece last week, so I don't know whether I felt like it wasn't worth kind of going into that one again. Wait until after game week, wait until kind of the transfer window closes and reassess. But I think João Pedro, I mean, we touched on him when you mentioned kind of the fact that you made up his points elsewhere, but obviously he really helped me out this week, so I didn't have that sort of spread. That ownership is always going to carry a bit of a whammy for non-owners, isn't it? And it was nice to be on the positive side of that, despite the lower XGI on the returns he got. Hello, Chris Wood from last year. A bit of a shadow of Wood from last season. But, it's one of those, isn't it, where I can see why people are interested, and without getting into kind of flight tracking nonsense, and acknowledging that footballers are not sat in economy class and they've got like very regimented recovery programs. 3 to 4 days after game week 4, which is away at Brentford, he's playing for Brazil in La Paz, Bolivia at high altitude. So that's something just to bear in mind. I'm going to throw that out there as a start, Sam. So yeah, João Pedro, equal sit for the moment for non-pin XGI as well, so doing all right in that too.
Yeah, he's off to a good start, which is so funny to sit here and say that after basically the inverse of that after game week 1, where we were all like, yeah, minutes are in doubt, not on penalties, not getting the data, just not an out-and-out striker, plays better in the 10. And lo and behold, when he plays in the 10 in game week 2, because Palmer's out, he looks great, plays 90, gets good data, fine. So I think with João Pedro, it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. All of the factors that I've just said all together there are all still true, but week to week, he will get points. Like he's not going to just get nothing throughout the season, and he's not going to return 3 every single week either. So I think at 7.6 million, he's good value for money, and he's especially good value for money if Cole Palmer is out of the side. If Cole Palmer's not there, then it leaves them with an option of playing Delap up top, João Pedro in behind, and he gets more space. He's much better as a 10 than he is a 9 in my personal point of view. He plays off the striker very nicely and in those pockets of space. And if Palmer is out for a few game weeks, I'm going to be very tempted to try and get my way to João Pedro, even without the best set of fixtures to come. I'm free hitting in game week 6, so the next 3 are interesting. After game week 6, I think it's Liverpool in 7, so it's not great. But I'd still be tempted to go there, knowing that there's a chance he's on penalties. He's going to get better minutes if Palmer's out the side. And obviously more impetus on him attacking and getting the shots away without Palmer there as well. It looks like Palmer's going to be back fairly soon. He might even be back for game week 3. We'll go into our teams later on, but I have a funny feeling that he could well be back for game week 3, but we'll wait and see on that for more information. If that's the case, I'm much less bothered about getting to João Pedro straight away, because the fixtures are middling, they're fine, but he will get subbed off early. If he's not playing in the 10, he's going to be probably playing either up front or on the right wing. And in either of those positions, either Esteval or Delap are going to steal minutes. So for me, he's a good pick, but he's not a great pick if Palmer's playing.
Yeah. But noting as well that he got the minutes. He got full 90, didn't he, this weekend?
He did, because Palmer's not there.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of what shifts the needle really on João Pedro to some extent. I mean, that said, as you said, he's in the time he's on the pitch, I think that he probably is, especially if he is playing in number 10 role, or kind of, I don't know, I think it's that kind of general sense of versatility is what really kind of appeals to Maresca and appealed to Chelsea. And yeah, I was a tad disappointed he did go there, because I was worried about his sort of potential minutes, because I did like him a lot at Brighton, despite the fact he trolled a lot of people last year. And I really like kind of his backstory as well, from, coming from very humble beginnings. I know that he moved to Watford during the pandemic, and his like stepfather, who was very close to, died very early, like when he just moved over and all this sort of thing. But he then scored the next week, and very, very strong, resilient individual, which I think is really, really cool. That sort of thing I think kind of helps you sort of, I guess, sort of buy into a player. And that's irrelevant for FPL, but it does kind of add to the mystique of the individual. And you're right to kind of highlight the fact that the fixtures are like generally pretty good for Chelsea. Like, obviously, it is Chelsea, so the fixtures are going to be good regardless. But there's not really sort of that, I guess, sort of spate of bad fixtures over a short term. Like there is a Liverpool in game week 7, there is an Arsenal in game week 13, but it's not the case that those come back to back. There's always sort of a relief after that kind of fixture wherever you look. And it's one of those that, if he does go well over the course of a little while and does keep returning, even with Palmer back and how it all kind of fits together, then he could be one of those who's visibly a bit of a long-term hold. And that's 7.5 when I bought him, or 7.6 now. One of those that you just sort of invest in and you kind of roll with the punches. You take a kind of a 60, 70 minutes, because the fact is that he's always going to produce decent expected underlying data when he's on the pitch. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Of course, we know penalties are in his locker as well. And there's nothing that kind of particularly sort of turns me off about him apart from the minutes, which is kind of something which I completely understand from your perspective, Sam, why you wouldn't be interested in him from that price, or you would, depending on kind of the context, but why you didn't go with him at the very, very start. But yeah, that plus the ownership like at the start of the year was something that kind of appealed to me a little bit. But would I be saying this again in terms of framing if he hadn't have gotten 15 points this week? Maybe not. Maybe he'd have been next up on the chopping block. Who knows?
Yeah.
It is one of those that's very sort of at the moment results dependent in terms of how you feel about a certain player, which is why he appears under form. And yeah, I guess in summary, completely understand why people are going to go there. But equally, I can understand on your point, from your perspective, why you might be like, okay, let's just see how this sort of plays out, especially with the international break coming and what I said about him going to Bolivia.
There is that.
Yeah. As speaking of international break jaunts abroad, Christopher Wood has a double header with Australia coming up. Always a concern for game week 4, but it is Arsenal. It is Arsenal, so you probably wouldn't want to kind of have him for that game, or maybe one you'd hide on the bench for that game.
He could even be benched himself for that, by the way.
Yeah,
he could be, because I think last season they rested him once or twice, and it was in these types of games where they just played with a couple of like kind of wide forwards, like a Hudson-Odoi and maybe. Is it Igor Jesus that they've got there now as well? And they've
also a new signing,
and Ndoye and McAtee, like all sorts. So maybe they're like Callum Wendo too, possibly.
Callum Wendo, that's it. Yeah. Awani may even make an appearance. The letter shows the wild Awani may appear. I mean 5 and 6. 5 and 6 is probably 4 and 5. Sorry, is probably the main sort of appeal for him. 5 and 6 is probably the main appeal with him. Back-to-back games against newly promoted opponents, and obviously West Ham and 3 are sort of the early sort of whipping boys, aren't they? So I can completely understand. I was speaking to someone at work today, said I bought in Chris Wood, full intent to captain him against West Ham, and I was just said, fair enough. I completely and utterly understand that. If you can kind of bring him in, you can hide him on the bench for game week 4, and then you kind of got him in place for 5 and 6. I mean, that's absolutely fine. At the moment, 1.3 is his XG. I think kind of puts him at equal 9th, something like that. 2 goals. So he's obviously overperforming, but his name is Chris Wood, and that's exactly what he does.
It's also better data than we're used to him getting as well. And considering how poor they looked in front of goal in pre-season, I'm actually quite surprised by that. Good fixtures to come. I do like him. I think he's a seriously competitive option at that price point versus a João Pedro. He like ticks all of the boxes that Pedro doesn't, and obviously the inverse is correct with Pedro for like playing for the better team and all of this. So yeah, it's an interesting one. If I needed to move for a striker, it probably would be for one of those two right now, but I couldn't tell you which one I'd go for until I heard more about Palmer's injury news, I think.
I think the thing that really puts me off Wood, which it really shouldn't, but it's just a contextual situation regarding the manager there at Forest.
Fair. Yeah.
Who knows? Like, if Nuno's come out and said that me and the owner aren't close anymore, and the Athletic was saying the other day that he and Edu have had a big sort of blow up. Edu's like the head of the Forest sort of group, and who's to say that if another manager comes in, that Wood keeps his spot? for the long term. Managers are such kind of funny, ephemeral beings. If you think about likes of Amorim doggedly pursuing a particular tactic or something like that. All it would take, say Mourinho went there and didn't fancy Wood in the first session, in the first kind of training session, and that could be it for him. Something that it wouldn't take very much for that to happen. Should these things affect your kind of judgment on bringing him in this week if you want to make a transfer? Absolutely not. But it's just something that would play a very small factor in my mind. Maybe it's copium, and people may be thinking that at the moment, but it would play a very small factor in my mind regarding him, because I do think that Nuno is tinkering on the brink there a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair enough. I didn't think to mention that, but I think that's a very valid point. And it looks like Marinakis and Edu have got their own theories on like replacing the manager, upgrading the squad. It sounds like he didn't really want Douglas Luiz. It was more the management team, like the recruitment team that wanted him, and so on and so forth. So maybe there is a bit of a new Broom approach coming at Forest, that they will look at revamping the squad slightly, and maybe Chris Wood's place isn't as secure when if the new manager comes in. So yeah, a very valid point, and I don't really have anything more to add on Chris Wood.
Fair. Do you have anything to add on Semenyo, though? He's doing very well, isn't he?
He's my fave. I love Semenyo. What a man. I just love him. There are just some footballers that, again, it's not like an objective thing, but I used to have it with Sterling back in the day. There's just something really quite likable about him as a footballer. I just really want to own him, and that's not a logical way of playing, but I've got good memories with him from last year. I did bench him a few times and he scored on my bench, which was annoying. But great memory of game week 38 with the brace. Obviously has gotten off to an electric start this year, and he has the shot volume. And if you've got the shot volume, that's half the battle won. Like, he's playing 90 minutes. He's getting 3 or 4 shots minimum a game at the moment. Even with middling fixtures. Now, it's not like the best run of fixtures to come, but it's not a terrible run either. I think if you're looking at moving on a Cole Palmer or a Saka, but who is definitely out for 3 or 4 game weeks, Semenyo is one of the best options out there if you just want a longer term pick that you can play in any week, because he's absolutely fine to play against a side that are going to have the majority of the ball and just catch them on the break, because he's got pace for days. He can get past a man, and he can get shots away. So yeah, I just really like him.
And if you back him for a good season, I mean, I think that's a good idea. I mean, I think it finished like 12th or 13th like last year. I remember kind of vaguely marveling about the fact that he was kind of just behind Bumo for underlying non-pen data, that is. Yeah. And he also gets the minutes, which is fantastic. First, it's kind of, I think he started pretty much every game last year, maybe kind of one or two, give or take 1 or 2. Yeah. Obviously, there is kind of potentially a bit of overcrowding midfield at the moment, but I don't know. The next 3: Tottenham away, Brighton at home, Newcastle at home, 2 home games. And as you said, he's the sort of player you can play in every game because he's got that shot volume. And that is fundamentally quite a positive thing about him. He's actually currently 3rd behind the mighty Calafiori and that Erling Haaland bloke at Man City for non-pen XGI right now. And I completely understand why people are looking at him. If Palmer's out, then Dan said in the chat that he probably is going to be one that he will bring in. And I'm with you that he's one of those kind of late risers, fable glue guys, isn't he? That you just kind of sit on and just leave for the rest of the year. And it might be, here's me kind of starting to talk myself into looking at him more seriously, potentially, although I've made my transfers. So anyway.
Oh, spoilers. Everyone thought it was me.
But, he's just one that maybe if you do get him in as early as possible, does present you with an opportunity to get those points, those differential points for a player like that before everyone else gets on board. On an individual who's going to return fairly consistently throughout the course of the season. I mean, I'm surprised you haven't gone there yet yourself, Sam.
Yeah, well, he was in 1 or 2 of my drafts to many people's observations, let's say, on YouTube. There are a few criticisms of that, or critiques, considering his game week 1 fixture. But I just really like him. I back the player. The quality's there. Gets the shot volume in a good enough attack. I think absolutely fine. And if you are looking at saving some money by downgrading Saka or Palmer, if he is out longer term, I think he's one of the stronger options that you can just hold on to until you wildcard, because he's playing every week. He's getting 90, he's getting shots away, so he could return in any week.
And also, Ghana didn't qualify for AFCON.
Oh, good point. Great shout. Like that. Although I imagine I'll have wildcarded by the point we get to AFCON, to be fair.
Well, you will have 5 free transfers as well. So,
That's true.
you can do whatever you wish. But yeah, no, that's a very important point to just kind of just bring onto the table. So yeah, form, all with valid claims to this. I'm sure we will include a couple over the course of the year who maybe aren't particularly in the same way, but yeah, all valid. And I do really like Semenyo. I think he'd be one of those who I'd like to bring in ideally, but it's just not quite happened for me this week. On the other side, Bruno Fernandes. So I mentioned earlier about his got net negative this week somehow, but I think if he did score that penalty, Sam, again, touching on that outcome thing, then he would be mass bought in this week and everyone would be captaining him. As it is, considering I haven't gone there, again, another spoiler, I am quite glad because I think that's going to lessen the damage if he does return and the player that I bought in doesn't.
Yeah. I think, you're completely right. It's a bit of outcome. There is also a sprinkling of what we've seen anecdotally in the first couple of game weeks where he is playing a little bit deep for a lot of people's liking. Definitely. He's not getting the shot volume that obviously we've just talked about Semenyo getting. And there are other options in that Man United team where last season, if you were looking at a good fixture for United and you did want a player, it was basically Bruno, maybe Amad Diallo at times if he wasn't injured at that point. So this season, you've got 3 options just in the midfield ready to go. Arguably even Amad, although he's reverse out of position, so not exactly great. You've got Dorgu in the back line. You've even got Sesko up front if he starts. You've got loads and loads of options that you can look at rather than just Bruno Fernandes. So I think that's where some of the spread is coming in the fact that he hasn't just been mass bought, but obviously the penalty as well. If that had gone in, it would have sharpened everyone's focus on Bruno Fernandes. He would have got DEFCONs, he would have got a penalty, and just those 2 isolated incidents by themselves would have maybe broadcast to the world just how valuable an FPL pick he can be on his day. All of that being said, don't get me wrong, I'm not glad he missed that penalty because there is now a risk that he doesn't take the next one because they've got 3 other penalty takers that could put their hands up. However, if he does keep penalties, obviously that's a risk, but if he does, I think he's a fantastic player to have for Burnley at home and arguably the best, if not one of the best captaincy picks as well. So I quite like the fact that people aren't flocking to him as desperately as I thought they might, because I do have him and I've had him for 2 game weeks, and as annoying as he's been, I had him for this reason. In game week 3, I was going to captain him. So I probably intend of continuing with that despite his slight positional change. I think it's probably fine, and he can still easily return in this game. He can still get DEFCONs. He can still get a penalty. Who knows? So yeah, fixtures, obviously short term, very good. Longer term, not great. I'll probably look at moving him on in game week 4 if I can. But for game week 3 itself, I'm absolutely happy with him. And also it's worth noting, a player like him is never a bad pick. So if you have to hold on to him, even for Man City or Chelsea, it's fine. You can. He can get DEFCONs. Yeah. He can also get lucky with a return as well in any week because he gets 90 every week, because he's just all action. He's never a terrible player to own, but do target those fixtures. I think there are 3 or 4 good Man United options though. So I'm happy the crowd is a bit spread on that one.
Yeah. I mean, obviously Burnley's the obvious carrot this week, and as you mentioned, City and Chelsea in 4 and 5 are kind of off-putting. It's kind of like a bit of a weird sort of bridge week with those players. And obviously, I mentioned to you the other day that I was interested in potentially looking at free hitting. And the problem is that at the moment I just don't have the conviction, because you'd have to be United heavy, and you'd have to have all 3. You'd have to have 3, and I just don't have the conviction about United to go there. I mean, they do have their XG is kind of obviously coloured by the penalty, but I think they're kind of 10th at the moment for non-pen XG that they've created. And Villa and Wolves are the other 2 who have failed to score a goal, and they're kind of at 1.4 and 1 respectively. So right down the bottom of the table. United are kind of mid-table for XG overall as a team.
They've played tough defences as well.
They have, and it is the case that it really kind of gets the nub of form versus fixture, doesn't it? With these sort of individual kind of characters, like I really like Cunha, so I've gone with Cunha as a vibe. He's got 190k transfers in, and as you said, there's all these sorts of options out there. It's just from at the moment it is a vibe, and that's kind of how we are making decisions right now. Plus, kind of looking at kind of old school data and what we know with United, it is very much about kind of, if you're sat with a United asset like Bruno, you're going to capture them. Obviously, for someone like me who's thinking about kind of making that choice, I was just thinking, yeah, ceiling maybe, and also kind of thinking, well, okay, he's been playing as a 9, but if Sesko comes in, I don't think that's a bad thing for him either, because he did very well at Wolves playing in that role behind the striker. So,
yeah.
I quite like. I think Cunha's on 0.9 non-pen XGI, was invisible, admittedly, after kind of 20 minutes against Fulham, but against Fulham, against Arsenal, definitely kind of caught my eye. United are creating, admittedly, they are taking a lot of long shots.
Cunha loves those though.
Exactly, and as I said after the Arsenal game, if they aren't playing an elite defence or a well-organised defence, or a Premier League standard defence we saw with Fulham, maybe it wouldn't take very much for them to really sort of pop off. But I don't really have the conviction in them as a team to be pulling my free hit and going all in.
Yeah,
basically.
I agree with that.
I'm happy to have one. I'm very happy to have one, and after that, kind of taking my chances in the kind of ensuing games until. I can't remember. I think it's kind of game week 9 onwards. They then kind of had this really, really nice run all the way till January. Like I said, in that kind of the final preseason pod. So, yeah. The man who's gone for me for buying in Cunha has been Florian Wirtz, who fell overnight. I had very, very high hopes for him, Sam. I think he'd eventually be fine. I don't really want to concern ourselves with the tedious sort of talk spot level of banter that used to people getting into on him. But in an FPL sense, as I kind of hinted at earlier on, he's kind of got to go, really, for now. In 4 and 5 after the Arsenal game, they've got Burnley and Everton, and the fixtures do sort of again ameliorate. And probably he's been overshadowed, I think, by his teammate Gakpo, hasn't he, to some extent? And plus, kind of, I think the Gakpo, because he doesn't have to travel very far for international break, is probably the one that I'll probably be looking at bringing in game week 4 or 5 if I can. Or maybe one of the defenders. I don't know yet. We'll see what happens with Palmer. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very happy to have occupied the price point so I could get someone like Cunha, because I think the original plan back in the day was to have 6.5s or even 5.5s in that slot. But yeah, it's just not really quite worked out, unfortunately. I think there's going to be a little bit of time for Wirtz to feel his way into how he kind of gets on and kind of all the patterns of play with his Liverpool teammates.
Yeah, I completely understand that. If you're a Wirtz owner, I would understand the frustration. All I would say though, it is just 2 game weeks. Like he's getting decent minutes, not bad data either. Like the first game week, I think he got just a shade under 0.5 XGI. Obviously, Newcastle, he struggled a bit, got 1 shot away, I think. Newcastle were a good defense and a solid midfield 3 as well. So I wasn't expecting him to necessarily have the best day at the office against Newcastle. Arsenal will be the same, and I understand why people are selling him for that reason. I'm honestly not even ruling out buying him in game week 4. It sounds insane considering the amount of people selling him right now. But if he continues to get good minutes and he's playing for that Liverpool side, I don't think he's going to be a bad pick at 8.3, maybe 8.2 million if I'm lucky come game week 4 as my Bruno replacement going into back-to-back Burnley games. Obviously, Bruno out to Wirtz. Gakpo is also definitely up there for me as a player I'd be looking at buying in game week 4. I've not made my decision on which Liverpool player to get. I know it largely depends on whether they get Isak as well, because I think if Isak comes in, it affects both Gakpo and Ekitike because they'll start sharing minutes. Ungamoa as well might also start getting a few more minutes after scoring that last-minute winner. They obviously rate him very, very highly. Whereas with Wirtz, I don't really see a world where he doesn't just keep consistently starting unless he just is absolutely awful and just doesn't bed in. I think he's good enough to bed in. So I understand why people are selling him for now. I think you're right in saying eventually he will come good, and it's about whether or not patience is required. And FPL, although it's a long season, you do have transfers to make, so it makes sense to be moving him on for the time being. But because I didn't start with him, I'm unburdened by needing to take him out for Arsenal. So I'm trying to think very calmly about whether or not he could be a good asset come game week 4 when everyone else has jumped away from him. I don't think it's that bad an option to hold on.
No, definitely not. I mean, if you look at it and just think, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to keep hold. Fair enough. I mean, for me, I think that FPL is one of those games that you have to react to what you see in front of you sometimes. And I'd always sort of intended that if it didn't work for the first couple of weeks, I did say this. I'm very sure I did say this, but I did say this. Then I would be moving off, and so it has proved. And if he proves me wrong, then great, because I do love Flo from Fantasy Bundesliga, and I really hope he does sort of prove himself and silence the Boo Boys, because it is incredibly tedious, to say the least. And
Has
final
it been
one.
that bad? Sorry.
You know what it's like online though.
I
They
know,
spend so
but
much money on him and all this sort of thing. Like, people do kind of willfully overreact and obfuscate and all this sort of nonsense. Like, I mean, I'm not a Liverpool fan, and I still think this.
Yeah, I think if I owned him, I'd maybe feel differently, because I'd be watching more closely. I'd be more emotionally invested in his performances. I don't think he's played that badly. I've watched both of the matches, obviously both big matches Liverpool were playing in. I just don't think he was bad at all. Even in the Community Shield, I thought he was pretty involved, close to goal at times. I've not seen anything that would suggest to me he can't be a great FPL pick. And he just hasn't got the points yet. I get that. It's annoying, but it's 2 game weeks. So if I had him, I'd be holding on to him, put it that way.
The only thing that did cross my mind, as I said last week, and James on Planet also said this as well, is that there is a potential, and we will see. I really hope he does become a good FPL pick, as you say, because I do love the guy. And he does put me in the mind of an Odegaard or a David Silva, in that he's like a very, very good footballer. It's just that, does that translate into FPL and what we're here for, which are kind of the end product stuff? I don't know. The draw, we need to see how that sort of.
But that's not the role he plays. In the Bundesliga, he didn't play that role. He's a goal scorer. He gets involved in those final phases. I don't see why he changes now.
But that's kind of managerial instruction in a new team. Obviously, all those a new league and all that sort of thing. The Bundesliga tax, as it were, and all these things do play a role. And also in FPL, you have to kind of think, okay, there's a fixture that's come up. I judge about the fact that I think that I should probably jump off this guy because the risk is a bit lower, because the fixture is quite difficult, and get on a guy whose fixture, there is a potential for me to kind of gain from making my transfer. That's kind of all it is at the end of the day. Am I closing the door to him? Absolutely not. Because you shouldn't ever do that, unless they're kind of Asensio, in which case he's never joining my team ever again. Speaking of Villa players, to round the section off, Oliver Watkins. No idea what's happening there, Sam. As I mentioned, Villa, United and Wolves are the 3 who have yet to score. And Villa have mustered 1.4 XG across the opening pair of games. Admittedly, they obviously were a man down against Newcastle. That's barely more than West Ham, and 0.4 more than Wolves, who have nothing to shout about. Not looking the best situation there at the moment. It might be, I consider, a sell soon. But, with Palace, that game midweek, as you said at the top, and then straight into it on Sunday, I'll definitely keep. The upcoming fixtures are all very good, on paper at least. Crystal Palace, Everton, Sunderland, the last 2 away. And I'm assuming many will have better things to be doing. But Ekatike, if he is around in game week 4, and Isaac hasn't signed, that could be an incredibly tempting move for a lot of people to make. But yeah, I feel like we've seen this before, though, Sam.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen this movie before.
Yeah.
I've jumped off him. And remind me, what happened next?
There was a certain Liverpool striker who was lighting up the league that we both, I think, went to with a little bit of an injury down on Watkins. I think Ollie Watkins might have done pretty well soon after. So yeah, it's so funny because I've just said all of that about Verts and framing and all of this stuff, and I'm sat here with Ollie Watkins and I'm getting a little bit concerned because of what I've seen with my eyes on the pitch. They're not creating much. They look a little bit flat. They're lacking runners in wide areas, and it doesn't look like Watkins is getting the service. But that's all like quite eye-testy subjective points. And who am I to say that I know better than Emery on what they need to do to start scoring more goals? The fixtures are good in the medium term as well. They've got 5 and 7 against promoted sides. Obviously, Crystal Palace, Everton before that isn't ideal, but it's fine. Like, they're good Premier League defenses, but they're not Arsenal, Liverpool, Man City level, so it's okay. And a good striker like Watkins, all he needs is a couple of half chances, and he could easily be walking away with 8-9 pointer in either of those two fixtures. So I think, again, I'm going to try and take my own advice that I'm trying to preach on other players and say, Watkins, for now, he's on thin ice because he's expensive. You don't want to hold on to an expensive player who is faltering for too long because of all of the opportunity cost there. And there are cheaper strikers who are looking just as good, if not better, well, way better, actually, let's be honest. But that can change very quickly in FPL. We've only seen 2 matches. It's not long ago that he was saying, I've had the best preseason of my life. I've scored in pretty much every single preseason friendly. I'm much sharper than I've ever been before. And we were all massively hot on having him for game week 1 as like a bit of a cheat code at 9 million. Maybe he could get another 30 plus attacker returns like he did a couple of seasons ago. We're 2 weeks in. If this happened at another point in the season, I wouldn't be as worried. It's just the fact that it's right at the start of the season and he hasn't returned yet that is freaking me out a little bit. So, yeah, Nobby in the chat, very good point. Watkins XGI versus Brentford, 0.45. João Pedro's versus West Ham was 0.52 and a 13-point difference. It's there is an element of variance, an element of luck when it comes down to one game week at a time over a longer sample size, over a season. I'm hoping it balances out. And it's not like he doesn't have the fixtures to help that balance out either. So I'm trying to be patient. 1 or 2 more game weeks and it will be tough though.
Yeah, I agree. Just one of those where you kind of remind yourself that you bought in for the long haul with very good fixtures up until game week 9, I'm going to say, when they play City, something like that.
Yeah.
But as you said, he's one of those that because of the price point, he's always got to be monitored and under surveillance because if he's not returning against that price with the other options on offer, then maybe you look at it and think, maybe it is time to regretfully say goodbye to Ollie. And then next week, what's he going to do? He's going to pull 2 goals out of his posterior. Right, let's move on to the 1 week punt update for this week. Last week, you got very unlucky because Odegaard went off injured. Looks like he's going to be right. He was called up by Norway.
Okay, cool. I didn't see that.
May well play a part against Liverpool. I think we will need him, it's fair to say, despite the fact that we do have Ebi Eze now joining in. And that meant that my Gabriel Magalhaes 6-pointer came in. However, if I'd have chosen any of the other, I said, I'll leave the fullbacks for later on in the season. Maybe that was
we've got more confidence.
Maybe that was a bit of an oversight. I could have been out of sight already if I'd have made a sneaky Timber pick. But it's going down. I'm gathering not as many points from Gabriel. This week, you've decided to spaff quite a big one.
I have, but it's not without logic. I did have a look ahead at some later fixtures. So I've gone with Chris Wood. Very good innuendo from you there, Tom. I did notice. However, so Chris Wood, obviously, great striker. We're going to want him, or I would probably want him as my 1 week punt later on in the season. What I did go and check, though, is what other fixtures are happening in the weeks where Forest have other good promoted side fixtures to be going up against. Just so happens in pretty much every single one of them, one of last season's top 3 or 4 with some elite level picks have also got very good fixtures against promoted sides. So with that in mind, I thought, okay, I've seen Tom's going with Mbermo because you did it first, and I was like, I'm going Man United. I don't really want to go Bruno because I'm gonna want him later on. I don't really want Cunha. I might want him later on. So I had a look around, and I do fancy Chris Wood for this one against West Ham at home. West Ham are shipping goals. They've shipped 3 to Wolves tonight. And Strand Larsen scored a brace, which I'm very happy about that he didn't do that in the Premier League when I needed him most. But it's, striker scores goals, striker equals inform. So I'm very happy about it generally. And he's obviously fit to play. So that's another bonus. But I digress. Chris Wood is my pick for this week. West Ham look all at sea defensively. I think he's going to capitalise. So yeah, I'm going with Chris Wood.
I really start thinking about this a little bit more, maybe. Although that said, I did think about Dan Ndoye for this week. It was very close to Ndoye and Bruno. Ndoye and Bumo. The only thing that put me in Bumo, and this is very silly, and this sort of thing that you can do in this particular sort of format, is that I've got Cunha in my actual team. I've got Bruno Fernandes in my draft team. Hedging, this hedges all 3 as the happiness hedge, Sam, the return of the happiness hedge. So yeah. Brian and Bumo on some set pieces. I'm, why not, eh? I know the quality of the player, decent at home game. And as you said, I think that Cunha, Bruno and co are on notice for later on in the year. I did think about Wood as well. And I do think it's probably going to be kind of close on game week 6, although probably is going to be we both shove Haaland in, and probably going to be close on game week 5 as well. I think it's that could be like a Watkins week or something like that, but if I don't use him, fine, because at the end of the day, I'm a Wood truther in that I feel like it's all just luck, and it's not, it's not his individual skill. It's nothing to do with that. It's just that he's getting very lucky. I actually believe that. I think he is quite a skill, just using all his experience, really. So yeah, fair play. And I kind of wish that I'd done that as well, but there she goes.
Mbeumo, before we move on, Mbeumo had a hell of a track record against promoted sides last year. Just saying.
Yep, flat track bully.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see.
There you go.
Might get lucky. I know, but now I'm worried that I've chosen the wrong United. 8 million, but hey. Right, on to captaincy for this week. A bit of a split pin for most, with Palmer news still on ice. We think that we're just not sure what the situation was with him. Had his scan not as bad, according to Cy Phillips, who's quite close to Chelsea, as it could have been feared, but fears that Fulham could come too soon. And Salah playing Arsenal, which is a perfectly fine captaincy choice, of course. If you are kind of thinking, well, I'm just going to default to Mo, completely understand that. But for us, I think it's Bruno or Cunha or Bumo or something like that, but probably Bruno for most people. Wood and Haaland maybe as the top 3 for this week. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I probably would. Salah's never a bad pick, like you said, but there doesn't seem to be a load of standout options now that obviously the 2 heavy hitters are playing each other, Liverpool, Arsenal, and Arsenal's like Saka is out, for instance, as well. So that removes one from the pack. Then you've got Gyökeres, who's still fairly new to the league and obviously has a tough fixture. That reduces his threat. So yeah, it's probably these 3, or like a United player, whichever one, pick your poison, plus Wood, plus Haaland, then probably if Palmer's fit, Fulham's not a bad one. João Pedro, if Palmer isn't fit, then could come into it potentially on penalties. But Fulham are a good defence. We've found that out several times over the last couple of seasons. Silva does drill them pretty well for the harder games. They get up for those. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's a bit of a stodgy one against Chelsea. So yeah, I think you're probably right in saying that I would agree with your opinion. These 3 are my probable 3 favourites on screen for this week: Bruno, Wood, and Haaland. Should we? Do you have a clear favourite out of this, or is one standing out at all?
But one thing, just quickly to say, on Fulham, I think that people may kind of out there. You may see people saying, "Oh, Fulham's XGC is really high." I think they're 5th from the 5th worth for XGC, and they did concede the penalty.
Yeah.
So exactly. If you look at the non-pen XGC, they are 3rd best in terms of defenses so far. So just bear that in mind. If you see someone out there saying, João Pedro is a great choice this week because Fulham's XGC is very high off 2 weeks. Just bear in mind that context. For me, I think I've got to play the fixture here, Sam. I don't own Wood or Haaland. If I did own Wood or Haaland, it's worth saying I think that I have a lot more of a quandary about it. But I didn't really see any reason to remove Job. I obviously was going to remove Fulkrug, but I didn't want to downgrade the midfielder. I wanted to get United sort of attacker in for the fixture. I didn't want to downgrade. I didn't want to upgrade Fulkrug and downgrade the midfielder. I wanted to kind of take Fulkrug out of the equation entirely because I'm a 3-5-2 ultra, and bring a midfielder in. And for me, I think I'm going to be playing the fixture, and I'm going to go for Cunha this week. I do think that at the moment it's probably meritorious to look at it that way. I do quite like, if you do have Wood, do have Haaland, I think just go with that and just forget about it. Like Brighton have been a little bit inconsistent for a very long period of time, I think it's fair to say. You don't know which Brighton's going to show up week to week in terms of their defensive solidity. I think they're kind of 5th or 6th from bottom in terms of XGC. Haven't seen the penalty or anything like that. And in terms of Woods, as you mentioned earlier on, West Ham have some difficulties, I think it's fair to say. clean sheet wipeout, of course, on this weekend. But for me, yeah, I think you've got to kind of back the United's. You've got to back the United asset you do own, and kind of look at it just practically for this week. I mean, if you do have a strong feeling about Salah versus Arsenal, then be my guest. My feeling is that Arsenal, we're just doing what we tend to do defensively and kind of restricting. I mean, I think our XGC is kind of probably kind of bottom 5, bottom 4, something like that. It's
Yeah,
pretty
and over
good.
the season it will be the top 1 or 2.
Exactly. And I don't know. You should never be afraid of captaining in a big game if you feel that way inclined around the Salah. But for me, I think just a player playing against a newly promoted team. If I didn't own, if I owned Wood, then fine. I probably would kind of just see that as kind of attacking the whipping boys. But yeah, for me, I think it's got to be the nice asset that you own. In my case, that is Cunha.
Yeah, makes sense. My armband's currently on Bruno, but probably more simply on Bruno because I don't own Haaland. If I did, I'd be very tempted to go there instead. I think that's actually a very close call. And I like the fixture matchup, City up against Brighton. That Brighton will play out. They will play a fairly high line. We've said it on this pod before. I just quite like that matchup for Haaland. So I do have a feeling about that one. If you've got Haaland, I would be tempted to just go with that. And if you didn't already have a Man United pick and had Haaland, I would almost let that put you off of going for a United pick and wasting a transfer on it if you've already got Haaland as a decent captaincy shout anyway. That being said, I don't have Haaland. I do have Bruno. So I think it's pretty likely it ends up on Bruno.
Yeah, absolutely. I just feel like you can read that Burnley game and however you want to read it and choose your own adventure. Could United still be a kind of a super group of soloists who find it difficult to work together and find a way through that Burnley defence? Or could you see it not that Burnley's defence are 1980s Milan and that they are a newly promoted defence missing 2 vital components that made them so solid last year in Trafford and Egan Riley? I think you've got to just kind of go with that this week if you are in that situation. But as you said, if there are other options on the table for you in terms of owning Woods, in terms of owning Haaland, then I think that would be absolutely fine as well. And what I do really like that this week is going to be a really, really kind of interesting split pen week so early in the season, because we do have kind of in the past, at least I've got the impression, this is qualitative, so do forgive me if I'm misremembering this, but in the past I do think there's been kind of a very sort of kind of 5-6 week sort of just Salah supremacy or Haaland supremacy, where there's just no point in changing the captain because there's been a really good spate of early fixtures. So I think it's quite good that something like this is happening week to week, and you're just hoping despite variance a little bit, aren't you? And with the Bruno missed pen, Sam, I mean, you're in a good place to benefit from Bruno because there's going to be sort of a suppressed effective ownership. And with me going with Cunha, obviously I'm hoping that that's going to be a practically uber differential captain who's going to make or break not my season, but at least kind of in the short term. I think it's going to be good enough. So yeah, vibe it hard this week is basically the advice.
Yeah, this one is a bit gut cally for this week. There's not like a clear standout. I think on the data models, if you want to back the data, Bruno is the leader, but not by enough to make him an obvious pick. And all the Man United assets are in there. Haaland's in there, Woods in there, Salah's always in there. You can go with a little bit of gut feel on this one, I think. But yeah, I agree. Cunha and Bruno and Mbermo to a lesser extent as well will all be good differential captains. I think they're all around the same sort of ownership. In fact, I think Cunha's a little behind, but he's increasing at a faster rate. So I think they'll all be roughly the same sort of percentage EO come the deadline. So I'll be interested to see what the EO drops are going to be when the game reloads. I think all of them are going to be very effective if you do captain any of those options.
Yeah, no, it certainly is quite an interesting one. Like, for example, on the base projections. Sorry, we're going to do this for a second. Just a quick second, if you're a Grass FC manager. The base predictions do obviously take Bruno as being the top for most of the algos, but over time, the first couple of weeks, because of the performances they've been kind of put in, you are seeing quite kind of decent projections for the likes of Cunha and for the likes of Bumo this week. So I do think it is pretty open, and there's kind of quite a lot of candidates basically in the meta. I mean, even Salah's kind of predicted to get 6. Right now, I'm looking at Solio, so I don't really kind of I've got no issue with whatever anybody wants to go with. Like, if you're convinced, if you're happy with it, then I think that's absolutely fine by me.
Completely agreed. With that in mind, shall we take a look at our teams as it currently stands?
So let's do it.
Let's do it. Tom, you're first up, and you have made some moves. Why don't you walk everyone through it officially? I know you've mentioned it already on the pod, but let's do this officially this time.
Yeah, so I did sell Krug, full Krug. I never go full Krug.
No
Go
Krug.
half Krug. Go no Krug. Right, as we should probably have done at the start of the year. So I sold full Krug on Saturday night, I think it was, because his bets dropped then, and he eventually did on Sunday night. I did want to kind of just, I don't know, like, because I kind of, it's one of those, I didn't really want to look at him in my team for that much longer, and I thought they're going to have the 1.5 million I free up from selling him to a a bit of a goo guy there. I think that was going to be absolutely fine, and that would kind of open up my kind of options for later on as we kind of move forward. I didn't want him anymore. Didn't want to take 0.1 on him. I just kind of thought, yeah, okay, I'm just going to get rid, which is very, very anti-price, but that's definitely something that's kind of how I kind of see it. And I saw Wirtz as well last night. I did wait to see him versus Newcastle. I felt like I should probably wait to see that, and he was very close to dropping on Sunday. I thought, I'm going to leave it, and I did wait to see that, and again, kind of made my judgment off watching that game. I've still got Palmer in situ, so I know some people did kind of sell Palmer straight off and hope that he'd be sort of injured for a longer run. But I left him there, just thinking that it might be all right and he might come back, and then sure it'll be all right after game week 4, because Chelsea have mentioned good fixtures for a decent chunk of period. I could take a hit and remove Palmer for somebody else, Semenyo, but I probably I'm going to elect to avoid the hit and get a Stev off the bench or something for this week. I mean, whatever, that he's going to have to do a lot of defending. It's fine. And just kind of have Palmer in place and see what happens next week, because if he's still there next week, I can remove him for a Gakpo or move him back to a Wirtz if Wirtz suddenly is kind of someone that I've kind of changed my mind on, done a full 360. Loose opinions, strongly held. And I could free hit Sam if it all goes wrong. So say there's a training ground injury to Cunha this week, then I probably would have to full free hit. It's like it's kind of like the insurance, which isn't wildcard.
Yeah.
But I like having gotten rid of Krug and Wirtz, saving that 0.2 drop in my team, and plan to see what happens this week and potentially move on. I can do a Stev to Van Dijk because I've got 2 million in the bank. I can do Watkins to Ekitike and increase my money in the bank, or I can do Palmer to Gakpo and increase my money in the bank as well. But all is open to me now, and it's kind of just a way of. I know I mentioned to you last week about that kind of 0.5 million handicap I've got. This kind of, because of how everything sort of panned out, I do suddenly have like a bit of money in the bank, so I'm able to kind of going forward be a bit more flexible. But using the 2 free transfers probably does sort of mean that I've got to be a bit more careful over the short term how I do things. As I mentioned earlier, I have considered a free hit. I don't think that's going to happen unless there's any sort of big emergency, like if Cunha gets injured, so there's a new transfer in, then obviously I will probably free hit, because I don't really want to be kind of dealing with that, taking a -4, -8 or something ridiculous like that. But I'm just not convinced by the free hit. It would be a really reluctant free hit if I did do that. Because it has to be triple nice, as I said, and then my risk appetite doesn't quite extend to backing that hard. But backing one of them, I'm fine with, and Captain Cunha, I'll go with, because I'm hoping that regardless of whether he starts as number 9 or Sesko comes in and he plays as number 10 alongside Bumo, that I think that there will be. Yeah, if one of them flies in early doors, and I think the ceiling's going to be there for him, and he's one of those players again that you can just play in every single game. And I think I'm fine with that for the short term. It's one of those that maybe I'm vibing a little bit, but I have said to you several times over the course of the season and pre-season that I do kind of like it. And what did Ross say to what does Ross always say, a Raptor? That what would you be more annoyed about? Would you be more annoyed if you hadn't gone with the player and they smash, or if you had gone with the player and they blank? I think in this case, because I've been vibing Cunha for quite a while, I think it made the decision for me when I was sat there looking the other day, kind of which one am I going to go with. So yeah, that's where I am.
I like it.
Yeah. I think it's kind of I'm pretty happy.
It's a very good looking squad, mate. Honestly, that I know you were toying with free hit. That looks like almost a perfect squad for this week. Genuinely, who are you missing really? Haaland and probably like another Man United player if you fancied it. So it all rests on whether Palmer's fit or not. Really, if he's not, then it becomes slightly less powerful. But a lot of people are going to have the same problem. So.
Mark Goo's done. I think I've seen people are saying
Mark
Goo's done a goal. So maybe I'll play. No, I probably would take a step. I don't know, 1 point from Mark Goo, 2 points from Estev, maybe Defcons to get him to 4 or 3. I think probably the expected points, if we really are going into that level of detail, probably are 3 points for Estev, 1 point for Goo. So yeah, Stevie boy, off the bench he comes. So yeah, thank you. I feel like it's got one of those things that is going to just, I think, because of where we are in terms of if I was doing better, I think I'd have just got Bruno and be done with it. But because I had a voice and because of the start being what it was, that I've got nothing to lose. So here we go.
Nothing to lose in game week 3. This is going to be a long season. So onto my team, similar elements to it. I've got Sanchez in goal, Tarko, Murillo, and Porro in my back line. Honestly, I'm chuffed with that 4 at the moment. I'm perfectly happy with all of them. Murillo's been a little frustrating not to get Defcon, but 3 good fixtures in the next 4. I'm perfectly happy with him for the time being. Midfield 5 of Salah, Palmer, Undai, Anderson, and Fernandez, who currently has my armband. Not completely locked on that, but I think it's pretty likely I will be on Bruno. Because I've already got Bruno, it makes me less likely to be moving for another Man United asset, although it hasn't escaped my thinking that I could potentially double up and really attack the fixture and then move that player on to a Gakpo in game week 4 or reverts potentially by getting rid of Palmer now and basically just do a little bit of a hokey-cokey or a progressive transfer plan where I'm not getting back to Palmer until about game week 8, I think. So that's an option. The other option is downgrade Palmer to another, like Semenyo, like Reinders potentially as well, which gives me money to potentially look at upgrading Strand Larsen or a GU to a João Pedro or a Chris Woods if I wanted to. All of that being said, though, I think given the news that came out today on Palmer being out for hopefully not that long, and he might even play Fulham as well. Obviously, we don't know that yet. He could miss it. They might want to rest him before the international break. But it is a Premier League game they want to win. They want their best players to be on the pitch. And generally, I think we overestimate the manager's likelihood of resting a player just to let them get a rest, especially at the start of the season. I think if he's fit, he'll play. I don't think there'll be too many tactical games being played just yet. So with that in mind, I am tempted to roll, leave Palmer in, and Anderson is first on my bench. So it's interesting that we've both gone for slightly different bench orders on the same 3 players. I've gone Anderson, Estev, and then GU. I don't think GU's likely to start, given that he played 90, I think it was 90 in the Carabao Cup this evening. I don't think you do that if he's gonna then play the weekend. You probably bring him off with a few to go. So I'd be a little bit worried about that him starting. Anderson, I think, is maybe ever so slightly more likely to keep a clean sheet and is good on the Defcons than Estev. For me, it's very marginal though, so go with your gut. I've gone with Anderson and I'm perfectly happy with him coming off my bench for 1 week only if Palmer is out. If he's out for longer and we think that he's going to be a risk in game week 4 as well, then the move looks more likely that I would be eyeing up Palmer out. Maybe a 1 weeker on a Cunha or on a Mermo and then over to Gakpo in game week 4, or maybe just go straight to Reinders or a Semenyo and just leave them in for a bit longer. And then next week's move will be Bruno to then Wirtz or Gakpo potentially. And that's me.
As is common with most podcasts or shows I've listened to or watched this week, Reinders hasn't come up for discussion at all until you mentioned him. I forgot he was even in my team. Yeah,
I still want him. I still like him.
No, I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be fine over the long term. I'm not particularly worried about him. Interesting. I think that bench order wise, I think it would be funny if United failed and Steph kept clean sheets. I'm back in the comedy. Palmer wise, I think that's probably my main sort of source of interest this week. If he's out, what the hell am I going to do? Like, if he's out for the long term, then yeah, probably I'll get Gakpo next week. But I've also got, unlike you, because you're a cleverer person than me, I've got a problem with I own this Dewsbury Hall fella, so there's definitely potentially recourse to remove Palmer for somebody this week and then move Dewsbury Hall up to Gakpo next week if I wanted to do that. So I'd take -4 this week, which I'd be fine with if it was Palmer, if he was out for a long time, which doesn't seem like it's particularly likely. So then I'm in kind of Semenyo, the area of buying in Semenyo, for example, if that case does happen. But in your situation and in mine, based on what we know right now, I think the not taking a hit, and in your case, rolling probably is the right thing to do. If, as you said, if things do kind of transpire, Maresca comes out and says, Palmer's out until September, October, then obviously that's a remove pretty soon. I think it's due to drop next couple of days, maybe. I don't think he's quite there yet.
He'll drop before the deadline, I think. I'm fine with that though. Like, it's okay.
He's a good enough player, right? That he's going to come back and make that back for you. A player like a full Krug or a Wirtz as it is, I don't think I've got the same level of faith in them. But fine. And
I think with Palmer as well, just a note, like, people seem very convinced he's going to be out. I understand it because he's such a high profile player. There's a bit of action bias going on with a lot of people where it's like, I need to do something about that. That's a flag on a 10.5 million player. If it was anywhere further in the season and he returned a few times already, people would be very reluctant to be getting rid of him. It's just because it's at the start and he didn't return in game week 1. I would try to be patient if you can. If we don't get any news on him, and the news so far is that there's a chance he could play Fulham, I understand there's narrative around, save him before the international break. He's got a groin issue. But he's had this groin issue for a little while now, and they've been playing him anyway. And they just didn't want to take a risk on him on Friday night last week. So as a precaution, they took him out. He made it all the way into the warm-ups of the game. So it can't be that bad. I would just, obviously there's a chance I'd take him out, but only if I think he's out for a bit longer. If he's out for 1 game week, I'm going to probably hold on to him, I think, and just let Anderson come in. Fine. And then I've got 3 free transfers to deal with other issues later on down the line. I just don't think people can be that certain, that sure of him not playing this week yet until we get more information.
I agree. And if it was any other player, then maybe I'd be kind of thinking, well, that's a great excuse to move him on. And it could be the case that, hey, I didn't start with Wirtz, I started with Bruno and I had Palmer. I think I would have probably been strongly considering selling him this week, but as you say, I don't think you can possibly know. Strand Larson could be an interesting one for you if he does go to Newcastle, which does look like it could happen. The risk of taking the pod, but I think that could be a really interesting one because I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. And plus, his debut in game week 4 could be against Old Club Wolves, 6.5 million Newcastle starting striker against his old team. That could be you could have stepped into quite a good situation there. So, I really like your team as well. I suspect we're going to score the same amount of points, and we'll come back in next week and be like, well, what the hell are we going to do to differentiate? Liverpool wise, so next week, obviously they've got Burnley.
That's what I'm holding on to my transfers for, by the way. Nobby in the chat.
That's why there's a lot going, isn't there?
And Palace next week as well. I want those three free transfers if I can have them.
Yeah, that's probably the time, isn't it? The time and place to be thinking about it.
Yep.
There we go.
Yeah, I think, it could be Ekatike, it could be Gakpo, could be Wirtz. Obviously, Liverpool defenders in there as well. Munoz, Sarr, Mateta. There are loads of options that I'm more interested in next week, and I think there's more upside there as well. Also, a quick one in the chat about Palmer being in poor form since the start of the new year. If you felt that way, then don't have him in the first place in game week 1. We bought him because we thought he would turn a corner and he'd be okay. So what has changed from one game week to make you disregard that opinion? That would be my only question.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, cool. Well, I think that's probably everything this week, isn't it?
I think so. We've tried to get through as much as possible. I'm sure we've missed a few things. So do drop a comment on the YouTube video if you've got any questions afterwards, or obviously feel free to leave us a message on social. We have been Who Got the Assist. If you wanted to go check out our social channels, you can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all one word written out, or FPL Pricey. On X, WGTA_FPL or at FPL Pricey on there. And on YouTube, WGTA_FPL, and I'm on here as FPL Pricey as well, doing night before the deadline stream. So this week it's a Friday evening stream, or early Friday evening, because I've got a flight to catch before the deadline. So any questions about Palmer can be asked and panicked over on Friday evening. I'm very much looking forward to making a last minute move there. And if, of course, you did enjoy the pod, please do one or all of the following. Following us on socials would be very helpful. Giving the pod a 5-star rating would also be greatly appreciated wherever you're listening. And of course, if you could leave a like and hit subscribe on YouTube, that would also be absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much also much for listening and watching along.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Sam. And thanks for listening. We hope we assisted you make sense of a really confusing start to the season, albeit we're still pretty confused here. Let's not lie. I'll be back on Sunday with Nick. So you're off on holiday. I'm off on holiday from Monday. So Nick, former co-host, just having a general chat. General catch up as we head into IB, see what he's been getting up to. But we'll have to record the video rather than streaming live, just because there's lots of stuff going on in the background. So watch out for that upload on the 9th. Regular scheduling continues on Tuesday, the 9th of September. Speak to you very, very soon.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?